Wicked. Right, are we on then? Here we go. People are appearing. Oh my word. Always first online. Well, two main people here. Martin Reardon, check him out. But also check out Chris with it. Is that me on a horse, Chris?
I believe it is, yes. I believe it is, actually.
Thing that I did last week.
It's even got your number on it as well, actually.
Mate, that's amazing. You've gone to a good effort with that. Hello and welcome, everybody. Good to see everybody's faces popping up. My name's Paul O'Neill. The Positive Pit Stop's here. It's the 8th episode. The Wednesdays are just being eaten up. Really looking forward to it tonight. So if you don't know, it's a 1-hour show where we get to speak about mental health and well-being with our hosts, myself and Tony, who is he Tony at the minute? Yeah, he is. Not the Positive Pit Stop, but also our guest as well, which is absolutely amazing. So yes, it's a great place to chat, to learn, to share positive stories. And for me, it's just a grand old place. So yeah, if you're new to the show, welcome. If you're not, then that's cool. I love having you around. Quick thank you to Jack Benyon, who's a good friend of myself and Tony's, because Jack jumped in for me. That's a tongue twister. Jack jumped in for me last Wednesday at the last minute, 10 minutes to go, and I couldn't get onto the show. There's a massive reason for that. I can't really share it at the minute, but it's quite exciting. Hopefully when it lands, there's a couple of people on there that know, but it was mega, and I'm going to share it with you guys when it drops. So that's cool. So yeah, we've got a belter of a show lined up, and I can't wait to speak to our guest. But Tony, what's happening, lad?
Yeah, just before I start, I would like to say a big thanks to Jack for last week. It was lovely to work with a professional presenter for the week. Got a lot of emails saying could we keep Jack for as long as we possibly can. Fair enough, all those emails were from Rob Marsh. You know, he's the star of the show. He's our Rob. Right, so this week, for those new faces amongst us, a little bit about the format of the show. As Paul said, we speak each week to guests from the world of sport and from entertainment. We talk a bit about their plans for the year ahead. We look back on some of the highlights of their careers, and we touch on a few aspects around mental health, trying to get a few top tips around how to cope with the stresses of life, but also having a bit of fun and passing on a few tips together. We try to make this as interactive as possible. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the chat function. So if you have any questions for tonight's guest or any comments that you want to put in around the show, just pop them in the chat and we'll likely bring you up on screen and get you to ask the questions. Hope you have a fantastic time enjoying the show. It's always great to see as many faces. So if you might not want to put your camera on, but if you do, it's always lovely to see lots of interaction. I guess a few of you are maybe zoomed out after lockdown. But yeah, lovely to see some new faces and many regulars as well. So over to you, Paul.
Wicked. Right then. So we've done 2 wheels on motorbikes. We've done 4 wheels in car racing. We're moving over to horsepower, proper horsepower and 4 legs. So Oli Bell is joining us, which is fantastic, like I said. The opening show, what a fantastic show that is. All my mates, when I told them about who was on, they were like, oh, the opening show, Oli Bell opening show. So you got some fans, mate, up in the Costa del Widnai. So yeah, how's it going, fella? And thank you for joining us, Geezer.
No worries at all. Thanks so much for asking me on. I'm very flattered. And yeah, we were at Aintree, and actually the talk of the town was just how well Jack did last week in Aintree. So yeah, just to add what Tony was saying. I feel very flattered that you've asked me on, and I'm looking forward to having a good old chinwag. And obviously after what happened at the weekend at Aintree with Rachel Blackmore winning the Grand National, I think it's fair to say that racing's in a pretty positive place right now with one of the best sports stories, I think, in well, certainly in my lifetime, and I think in many people's lifetimes. So yeah, very fortunate to be there, and had a big smile on my face for the last few days.
Yeah, and it's good, isn't it? To be just personally, I've been quite happy because my job has started to come alive a bit. Where what myself and you do kind of the same job. You're proper famous, like, but it's great, isn't it, to do what you love? And it's amazing when the work starts to come, and grab you, and you can go and do what you love, and you're always smiling, mate. And it does look like, I mean, the Grand National must have been amazing.
I totally I think that's really important, and a lot of people. I mean, I grew up in Somerset, and a lot of my mates is sort of, gardeners and whatnot. And my best mate was a tree surgeon. My other best mate down there is a gardener, and I was, they genuinely absolutely love what they do, and they don't get paid like particularly well, but they always are buzzing about life. And I think they're a bit older than me, so when I was growing up I played rugby and football and cricket with them, but then I sort of took a lot of inspiration from their attitude. And I was just fortunate enough to go into a career that fundamentally it pays quite well, but it's also I suppose the best way to say it is, if I didn't get paid well for it, I'd still want to do the job that I do. Do you know what I mean? So I never see it as work. I just see it as me just clowning around, talking about something I love to lots of people who are tuning in. And I find myself often having to pinch myself about moments in my career and my life. And I'd hate to ever come across as arrogant, but I do feel very, very fortunate to be doing what I do. And hopefully I can keep doing it for a few more years, because I do enjoy it.
Do you know, that is such an interesting point, Ollie, because I mean, there's a person on here that knows us very well, both of us, and that's Martin Reardon. And I work with Martin, and you work with Martin, but and he'll tell you himself that it is a job, but it's a job that is just so rewarding if you are passionate about that sport. And for me, racing is amazing. Do you know what I see it as? I mean, I always make sure I get the money I deserve, because I've got bills to pay like everyone else.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mess. It's a professional mess around with your mates, isn't it?
Yeah. And the stuff that you guys do, you and Martin, I've seen some of the stuff you do, and you can just tell that you guys are absolutely buzzing to be doing it, and it comes across. And there's an audience, whatever you do, if you weren't having fun doing it, I'm not going to have fun watching it. Do you know what I mean? If people aren't passionate about what they do, then that comes across. And so your guys' passion, fun, and enthusiasm, I've clicked on videos going, what are these clowns up to now? And ended up just laughing my way through it for 4 or 5 minutes. And I've really enjoyed that 5 minutes of my life, really. And I think that, let's not over egg what we do too much, because ultimately I just stand there and talk about horses running around a field. I'm not a brain surgeon or a nurse who, people have done serious things during the last 12 months, but doing what you do, and I hope to a certain extent what I do, is able to put a smile on people's face at a time when clearly there's a lot of people who have been struggling and have had an awful 12, 24 months. And I hope, hopefully with things opening up again, people can go about and the normal life or something near normal life can resume. But in the meantime, please keep doing what you do, and hopefully I'll keep doing what I do, because I do think it's important to smile. I think some people can be guilty of taking life a bit too seriously. And I've certainly actually recently probably put quite a lot of emphasis on little, not struggles at work, but when you have little foibles that only people in a team, I suppose in a Formula 1 team or racing team, you'd have disagreements or things that you sort of go back and forth, particularly in a creative environment when ultimately creativity is important. There will be creative differences. And I think I put a lot of, probably 2 years ago or something, early on in ITV, I probably put too much pressure on that. I was I really need to make an impact, or I really want to, do this or that, or whatever it might be. And actually, when you take a step back and you go, look, let's just smile again and have fun and enjoy it, it becomes a lot more enjoyable again. And I think in the 4 years that ITV have been covering racing, I've learned an awful lot about that, and probably come back more to the sort of kid I was when I first started out in radio and TV, which is, if people think I'm shit and people think I'm crap, they're not going to employ me, but they are employing me for me, so be yourself, don't take life too seriously, and ultimately what will be will be.
You know what? That is so true. We've kind of gone off on a bit of a tangent here because of what I'm saying, and Martin will probably back me up on this because he produces. If people don't know, he produces ITV's touring car footage and also ITV racing and darts and snooker and all sorts of stuff. One of the top guys on his game. But he knows me very personally, and I remember having a right struggle. This is my 10th year in British touring cars, covering the championship as a pundit. But I had a bad time at one of the races, and I've never really spoke about it, but I just lost the plot completely because I'm not a presenter. I'm a driver who's talking about it. But anyway, it was a nightmare, and I proper lost my confidence, and I was taking it too seriously. I was trying to be the presenter that I wasn't. I was trying to be that straight-laced, this is your job, you do what you do. And a mate of mine said, are you all right? And I was like, you could see he was stressed. I've known him for quite a while. And I told him everything, and he just went, mate, just be your effing self. Just be. And do you know what? Since I've been myself and I haven't shaved and I can't be arsed with my hair and I dress a bit scruffy and I wear my trainers and Martin's laughing, I think I've kind of got my own little niche of people who are like, oh yeah, I relate to him. He's the lad next door. Yeah. And you're dead right. You do have to be yourself, don't you? To a point.
100%. And I think to a point, like for me in my job, like essentially like I'm an understudy. Do you know what I mean? So I'd be like the number 2 driver. You know, I'd be I know he's not there anymore, but I've been watching Drive to Survive, like the Alex Albon to Verstappen, and obviously, you know, he's quite a sweet, nice driver, Alex Albon. He obviously wants the number 1 gig, and I'm not out to kill anyone or get anyone, but you know, it's quite difficult, and you've got to sort of navigate a path through the like nuances of each environment that you're in, whilst fundamentally remembering that, because as soon as you become, the best piece of advice I got when I first started out was don't try and be anyone that you're not. Don't look at someone and go, I'm going to sort of stand here and try and sound like that person or present like that person, because then you're just like a sort of you're a clone to someone who obviously is very good, but it's not authentic. And authenticity in our industry, and in a lot of industries actually, I think is really important. And I'm sure that not only do you, when you say that, Paul, enjoy what you do a lot more when you are yourself, but you also see people enjoy it a lot more as well, because there will be like it just sort of will radiate this positivity, and people will see that you love it. And I think people are clever. I think people know when someone's bullshitting. Yeah. Fundamentally, I think it's pretty obvious. And it kind of frustrates me when I see people who are being disingenuous in life, and I'm like, surely everyone else can see that, but sometimes people don't. But like, I think authenticity is important, and I think it's I think people can read through it, so there's no point like lying, because you'll just get found out basically.
Yeah, I think you're dead right. The general public are not, the people who are watching it, they're watching it for a reason, and they're not stupid. The average person on the street can sniff out a bullshitter, like you said. Yeah. You know, I work with Steve Ryder, who is a total legend. He's one of.
I thought you were going to say total bullshitter there.
He's that as well.
Yeah.
I speak to Steve probably every other week, and I don't know what it is with Steve. He's took a bit of a shine to me, and he always tries to help me out. And he always comes and finds me at the end of the day. If we're in the compound or we've been together at the final bit, you know, he'll come and shake my hand, and he's like, well, obviously not now, fist pumps all around. He's like, mate, good stuff. And you know, when someone means it, he's like, good stuff. He says, it took me a long time to walk and talk, mate. And, you know, stuff like that. And I think,
Give you a buzz, right? Gives you a real lift. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And it's just, it's a massive, massive privilege. And, you know, that was, like you say, it was the best advice I ever got. And I absolutely, you know, love what I do like you do, mate. It's brilliant. But for people who are watching this show, there's a lot of faces that I recognise, even that gnome in the corner there, Rob Marsh, you can see him. There's some cool people here. But how did you start, and how did you go about your career? You know, what did you want to do?
Well, initially, I wanted to be a footballer. I actually had this is very embarrassing, really. I actually had trials at Yeovil, who were in the Dr. Martens League at the time.
Oh.
And my mum turned up with a packed lunch and like dropped me off. And I basically got bullied for a week by the very good footballers that were there. So when I realised I wasn't that good at football and couldn't get into a conference side, where I went to school, I was a drama scholar. My mum was a drama teacher and sort of acting and all that nonsense, ironically, given I'm saying be authentic and people will read right through you. Acting has always been something, being on stage and sort of, I guess, being the centre of attention, I suppose. And then we had a school radio station, really lucky actually. And it only went within the sort of mile of the town that I was in school, but I presented the breakfast show. So when I was like 14, 15, 16, I was doing that. And then, so that gave me a bug for that, even though I was like, crap, ultimately, playing Busted Out and Spice Girls, obviously, to Oundle School. I think it probably was actually that sort of era, to be honest.
Absolute shite then.
But yeah, but anyway, so I did that, and my old man, like, it's kind of, I don't actually mind going into it, but there's a misconception with my job that nepotism is thrown around quite a lot, because my dad works for Talk Sport and he's a broadcaster, and my uncle's a racehorse trainer, he trains for the Queen and all this stuff, and he's obviously done very well. But I actually didn't see my old man until I was about 15, 16. So we saw him till I was about 8 or 9, and then 7 or 8, I'd say. And then we went through about 7 or 8 years of not seeing him, just family nonsense and all that. Anyway, then we went to school and they were like, you have to do work experience now. And I really wanted to get into the broadcasting industry. So I ended up reconnecting with my dad to see if he could sort of take me around and do work experience and whatnot. So we ended up sort of reconnecting, and we're, great, obviously great now. And I actually did work experience with him for British Touring Cars. So the first gig I had was going around, I think I did Alton Park, but it was one of those, I did a few events because I think Dad had a deal with Porsche or something. I can't remember, but anyway. And someone was ill, so he goes, you're going to have to do the interviews today. So off I went. I was 16. I had a high voice still. Interviewed Matt Neal, who's a giant, and I was about 3 foot at the time. And he was telling me there was an issue with a cam belt or something. I don't know whether Martin's told you, but I thought he meant his trousers.
He's told me. This is amazing.
So I'm looking down to be like, oh, bless him. His trousers came undone when he was driving, or whatever it was. And then, thankfully, the guy was not ill the next day and I didn't do the interviews. I made tea again. But that was genuinely my first experience of interviewing. And my dad then was like, look, you're actually a good interviewer. You just need to research your topic a bit more. I was like, yeah, no, understood. And then we went off. Then I did a few more things for Dad. Basically, in the school holidays, I'd go and report on events. So I was actually on radio age 16, doing like radio interviews and stuff, and and just worked really hard in the school holidays, basically. So when everyone else was going off partying, I was, right, Dad, early starts. I did a thing called the Land Rover G4 Challenge, which was really exciting. That was wicked. Like, I did the European trials for that, and I was camping out with the competitors, and honestly, I promise you, I grew about 2 foot when I was 17. So when I was doing it, I promise you, I looked like a young boy, like, but it was the best experience because actually you kind of become a man in those environments. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of learned how to broadcast, how to interact with people. I think social skills and like interacting with people, I've always been quite confident and quite happy to approach people. I don't mind sort of making a fool of myself. So it was more just refining my craft, really. And then at school, I went to a private school, and there's quite a lot of onus on going to university for the like statistics and all that stuff. But I had a history teacher who was probably the biggest influence in my life, because when all the school were going, oh, you've got to go to university, if you don't, you're a failure, like I was in the bottom set, and he loved horse racing, and he knew that I had a massive passion for it and would follow it relentlessly. And I did double history on a Monday morning, and I'd be hanging after, breaking the rules the night before. And he used to let me, he'd hand everyone prep to do and homework, and he'd hand me a Racing Post when we came in. So I used to sit on the back row reading the Racing Post whilst everyone's writing essays. And whilst they're handing their essays in at the end of class, I'm handing a page full of tips, right? So my mum gets the school report at the end of the year, and it was, all of them were, Ollie's a nightmare, throws paper, distracted, kicked him out 400 times. And history, Ollie's incredible. He's the best pupil I've ever taught. And my mum sat me down and goes, right, what's going on in history? And I said, well, he's a great man. He gives me tips. But he was the one that basically said, sod it. If that's what you're passionate about, and I could see that you're like, you light up when you do this, you know, that's your thing. He goes, let's make it happen. So he helped me write a CV actually, and sent it off when I was 17 to loads of TV companies. And one got back to me and they said, yeah, there's a job as a runner here. You start next week. So I moved house within a week of leaving school, moved house, went traveling for a bit. So within a week of coming back from traveling, moved up to London within a week, and then worked my way up from the bottom. So that guy, I see him at the races now. He came to York. We meet up every to go racing. Like he out of everyone I've met in my life, he's had the biggest impact on it because he gave me belief. Basically, he said, "You're not mad for failing. Essentially, you've got to do it." Basically,
that is. What a story that is unreal. So I was going to ask you actually, do you still see him? I mean, he must be an oldish guy now, was he?
Yeah. He's like 65. He his name's Philip Pedley. Every time I talk about my career, I always thank him. But he doesn't have a phone or an email address.
Is this Steve Ryder you're on about? He ain't got a phone or an email address.
Bill Heslop from ITV. I know where he'll be sat at York this year. So I will meet him there, and he's got two friends which I introduced him to. They're an ex-policeman, retired policeman, and they sit in the same spot and they just get drunk at York. And we go out for dinner, we chew the fat, we talk. He's like, yeah, I can't thank him enough, really.
Ollie, do you know what, mate? That is an absolute. That's just like the best story, fella, I've heard to do with somebody finding their feet in the way they work. It's like. I've spoken to a couple of friends over lockdown with so much time in the first lockdown. I was speaking to a few friends I've not spoken to for a while, and they were telling me some great stories about. One was a kid that basically, my mate was a racing driver, a guy called Ray Grimes. He went out, and one of the things that he had to do to get sponsorship was the guy who was sponsoring him. He owned some petrol stations around here actually. And he said, you're going to have to work in the petty station. So no problem. Ray loved his racing, did what he could, behind the till, blah, blah, blah. A couple of bad scals from up at Prescott Way near me, where we're just giving him a load of grief. And he ended up going outside, having a chat with them, kind of getting on with them and saying, do you know what, lads? You look a bit bored. I'm going to give you a job. And he gave him a job washing cars in the jet wash that wasn't working anymore. So anyway, this lad has got one of the biggest washing places now in the Northwest. And he said, I didn't see him for years. And he said he was instructing at Alton Park after he'd finished racing, all that, like 20 years later. And he shook his hand and he went, you probably won't recognize me because he was 15 then. This guy's like, I don't know, 35, whatever. Yeah. And he went, I just want to thank you for what you did for us. Because how cool is that, mate? It's like your story. I love that.
There's a great clip of Ian Wright meeting his old PE teacher called Sid Pigden, and that just makes me well up every time. But if I could sort of relate it to anything, it would probably be similar to that story, Paul, but also just somewhat as particular, and not to go on too much about it, but particularly because of what happened with my old man when I was younger and not seeing him, to have sort of a male influence sort of help, my mum wasn't like my mum, I'd have so much to thank for, but as a male influence, someone like that who sort of guides you. And my best mate, who's actually getting married at the weekend, his parents, because my mum moved to Cyprus when I was 16, so I lived with his parents for the last 2 years of school. And again, that sort of influence and just having people that sort of can shape your life, you probably take it for granted a bit when you're younger, but it's now as I'm a bit more sort of reflective and look back on things, I'm indebted to them for everything. Just little things, I know it sounds really stupid, but teaching me how to change a wheel on a car and things like that. I didn't have an old man to do that when I was younger, but I had mates and his parents and stuff. So yeah, those things that, I say, you take for granted, that they shape you more than you realize at the time. And essentially, to answer your question, having people like that help me on that path gave me the confidence and the knowledge to then survive once I had my foot in the door, because a lot of people in TV need an opportunity. I think TV, ultimately, media and TV, I think is actually relatively forthcoming in giving people an opportunity. It's what you do with the opportunity when you get it that is really important, and you can either grab it and run with it, or you don't succeed. And I was fortunate enough that I had plenty of people supporting me, but also I was able to take advantage of the opportunities I got, and I was in the right place at the right time lots of times.
Do you know, and I think, Ollie, that's from my point of view, mate, that's perfectly put, because it's in the same situation as me. I was never a champion race driver. I was someone who got on the podium, won a couple of races, but Simon Parry, who was at ITV, who was the series editor at the time, he personally rang me up and he said, and I'll be dead honest, like I was on the show, he went, "We've got 200 quid in the budget, mate. What your Saturdays and Sundays looking like?" And that's what I did. Until they put me on a better contract and rate, I got like you said, the opportunity was there. I thought to myself, how many drivers who have not really won championships and that I've got a chance here? So yeah. And you know, when you say about people helping you out and shaping what you do, Simon Parry for me was the guy that helped me massively. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have this 3-bed semi in Widnes. It was only about 40 grand, to be fair. But, but you know, but the thing is, Ollie, you then want to help pass that on and help people out.
100%. And I get messages now from people, youngsters. During lockdown, actually, I put something out on Twitter saying, like, if you want, because we're all bored, right? So we're bored with egos. So what? That's like the worst combination ever. And I was like, look, if there are young people that want to know, like, any advice, any help, you know, just let me know. Like, I'll try and give you the advice or whatever. And loads of people got in touch, which was amazing, actually. It was really nice. And, you know, anyway, I've kept in touch with pretty much all of them, actually. And I think if once lockdown's over, a few of them are going to come behind the scenes and stuff like that. But I think exactly that. I think we have a responsibility to be the people that we needed now that we're in that position. And I still don't kind of feel like I'm in that position. I still feel like the young sort of work experience kid in a weird way. That's probably why I don't take my job too seriously. But I do kind of, but I know now that I've been doing this for sort of 15 years. And I kind of probably do have a bit more of a responsibility to help. I basically just kind of feel like they did an awards, right, at the Sports Journalist of the Year, or it's SJA Awards, and it was like the Young Broadcaster of the Year. And basically throughout my whole career, I'm like, oh, the youngster coming through. And I was like, what age is that? And they were like, oh, it's up to 25. And I'm like, 10 years gone now. I'm like, I'm way out of that category now. But in my head, I'm like, I should be nominated.
But you know, I always laugh. I always laugh because I get asked to like host some awards or give out an award, and I'm just like, who would want an award of Paul O'Neill, who's raced in MGF Cup and British touring cars? And you forget how many people actually look up to what you do. And that one of my problems, Ollie, is that I don't get it. Like, I'm still your man who I lived 4 streets down from where I live now in a 2 up, 2 down. So I'm a bit of a home person. I like to be around here, but I just laugh, like, you know, because it's like, it's amazing.
And not that I had anything to do with it, it was more Martin and the very clever people behind the scenes. But when ITV Racing won the BAFTA, which we did in our first year for the Grand National coverage, we won it. And I was like, this is bonkers. Like, I'm looking around and sort of Anton Deck's coming up to me saying, well done. And I was like, my brother texted me, obviously, saying, like, well done, that's good. And it was nothing to do with me, really, the coverage. But I was like, oh, sod this, I've got to celebrate with someone I love. So I snuck my brother in for the after party. Just got a shit face with him, because it's just totally bonkers that a kid from Somerset's even like at that event, let alone, you know, anyway, the whole thing was mad. But like, it's important to just kind of, I think have people that you love around you for those moments when you're sort of doing well and and enjoying it with them, basically.
I'm just going to jump in at this point, because what's also important, I think there is so much pressure put on younger people to get the education to go to university. And I mean, we were just chatting before Paul came on the call, Ollie, and between the three of us, we've probably got about 3 O levels if we put them all together. And it's important, I think, for younger people to realise that there are options. If you don't get all your exams and you don't pass your qualifications and you don't go to university, that's not the end of your life at all. It's the start of another chapter. And
Yeah.
Well, if you, Tony, you've got 2, Oliver's got 1. Is that right? That's the 3 O levels between you.
Yes.
I'm not adding much to that party, unfortunately. You know what though, Tony, you're so right, and a lot of people nowadays, I think, particularly university I mean, you're spending a lot of money in the current climate. Obviously, I feel really sorry. Like Khadija, who obviously I got close to during the documentary, she's at university at the moment. It sounds utterly brutal for them, right? Really harsh. But for me, and this is kind of what I was saying about the opportunity thing, is like, I didn't go to university, but someone gave me an opportunity. I was earning like genuinely like pittance. Like each month was a struggle, but I had a foot in the door, and that obviously I could see that there was potential for more, like, you know, one day I might be a presenter or something like that, or be an assistant producer, then an editorial assistant, work my way up. And my big thing is, like, it sounds stupid, but like, if you're polite to people and you work hard, people will want to help you out more. So even if you don't, as soon as you get out into the big wide world, no one has ever asked me in my life whether I've got an A level, a GCSE or whatever. No one cares. What they care about, I think, which is far more important, is whether I'm polite to people, whether I'm hardworking, whether I'm going to be on time, whether I look okay in public. And admittedly, sometimes I look a mess in public, you know, wear tracksuits and whatnot. But as I get older, I'm getting a bit better at it. But these things that sort of human beings care about, as opposed to what schools care about, I think is far more important. So if people don't go to university, but they do get an opportunity, like, remember like the fundamentals about being a good person, and then you will thrive and people will want to help you out more. Because I don't care if someone didn't have a degree, I wouldn't care. But if someone was rude, I would care ultimately. So being polite, I think, is really important.
That's really, really well said and well put. And you know, just being kind is actually being able to be kind to people is a huge skill, which is massively underrated. And I did a lecture a couple of weeks ago. You know, I feel a fraud because I'm a visiting fellow at Leeds Beckett University, and the closest I ever got to a uni was going to the 10p a pint nights and going to gigs. And
I've been to a few freshers weeks. Don't like that.
But you know, even I did a lecture a couple of weeks ago about social entrepreneurship in nursing, and there was 24 students on the call, which was a video, and none of them had the cameras switched on. You know, they're at university not getting the social skills that university life is one of the big things around it. So it's, you know, it is really, really tough. Just want to ask a couple of questions. You touched on the Riding a Dream documentary.
Yeah.
Love to hear more about that.
Martin and people at work are probably very bored of it, but I think kind of what we were saying about helping people out and giving opportunities. Now we're in a position of relative authority, you know, not authority, you know what I mean? Like, now you have a platform, essentially a voice, I guess. Now I could either use a voice to sort of just carry on in my own little world, or I could use my voice and platform, which I've worked hard to have, to improve other people's lives or change perception, perhaps. And I think one thing that I've always noticed in racing is that it's a bit up its own arse sometimes. It's a bit set in its ways. And I was at the races and I looked around, and there was no person of color there. There was no diversity. It was just a lot of sort of white people, essentially. And it's always sat sort of uncomfortably with living and growing up in such a multicultural and diverse and wonderful place as England, and particularly London. I thought it doesn't really add up. Anyway, we covered a story on the ITV News about Ebony Horse Club, and it highlighted this wonderful organisation in inner city Brixton that is a really important community centre, basically, and they use horses to help young children. So after we played that piece out on the show, I wanted to pay a visit to them. They're not based too far from my mum. And I went in and said hello, and they asked me to be a patron for the charity. And I thought, I've never been asked to be a patron before, and I don't really know what that means. So I said to them, like, what do you want me to do? And they said, well, you can do as much or as little as you want. Just having your name on it is good, etc. Blah, blah, blah. And then I thought I could just do a fundraiser and raise like a nominal amount of money for them, which would obviously help, but it kind of doesn't have like a long lasting legacy. It's kind of, an expense essentially. And I had an idea actually to if I could find a spot in a charity race to train someone up from Ebony, give them the experience of racing and showcase to racing like the wonderful place that is Ebony. So I was at a lunch and I sat next to someone from Goodwood and I said, can you give me a spot in the Magnolia Cup? And they said, yes. And then on my right, I turned around to someone and I said, can you give me some money for this project? And they said, yes. And then I thought, okay, I need to find a film director and someone to take part. And my brother lived with a guy called Tom Bolwell, who's a film director. They went to school together. And so me and Tom went around Ebony. We met the only person, there were two people that could qualify for the race because of their age and like schedule. You had to be over 18 and a woman. And Khadija was the only one that could do it. So we put all our eggs in one basket. She failed her first assessment horrendously. She sort of fell off 4 times. She never ever once said to me she was going to quit. She was like, right, how do I have another shot? She galloped a horse for the first time 6 days before her race. So that would, I imagine, in sort of like touring cars terms, imagine never being in 6th gear or 7th gear or whatever before you race in a touring car event. I mean, that's the sort of equivalent. So she failed her assessment. She had to do Ramadan, her A-levels. She broke her neck 3 months before training started, falling off a horse. I mean, it is genuinely like a Hollywood story. And the horse she rode had been retired 6 months before. So there was absolutely no way she was going to win this race. Like, I couldn't even, like, someone asked me beforehand, what do you want to happen? And I said, if she just gets back in one piece, I'll be absolutely over the moon. And we went to Goodwood. She was an absolute bag of nerves, and she ended up winning the Magnolia Cup. And but like, even when I talk about it now, I still don't do like the madness of it all justice. This is a girl who had never ridden a racehorse, who had to do Ramadan and her A-levels. She'd only sat on a racehorse, I would say, probably between 15 and 20 times before she rode in a race against very experienced riders at Goodwood in front of thousands of people, becoming the first hijab wearing jockey in this country. And when we got there as well, because of the news story, which none of us really were aware of when we did it, there was so many media. Like, I've never seen media at a racing event like it. Like, the press were in her face in the paddock. She's like an 18-year-old girl. It was bonkers. Anyway, it has now been, I think, not like, I don't know, I can say actually, but we've just actually signed it off to be turned into a feature film actually, which is great. Yeah, it's wicked. Yeah, I signed that yesterday. But I'm not really surprised. Like, it is a Hollywood, story basically. And I think of all the presenting stuff, and I'm probably waffling on, so I apologize, I'll be quick. But of all the presenting stuff I do, like, I'm, inwardly quite proud of it. And like, obviously I have a good job on what we were talking about, but like, this to me is without a shadow of a doubt, the most proud I've ever been of anything, because we've given a different perspective to the sport. Hopefully we've left a legacy because we've set up the Riding a Dream Foundation Academy, which is a pathway program to children from inner cities, which me and my brother have just set up. That's not been announced yet, but that's been set up, got grant funding for it. So we will leave a lasting legacy in the sport, hopefully. And we've kind of, not through us, but Khadija has shown that if you give people opportunity, like we were talking about earlier, like there are some incredible people out there that all they need is someone to believe in them and to go, do you know what? Let's see if we can do this. And if we hit a few bumps in the road, don't worry, we'll persevere. And I think the fact that we were only a really small team that did Riding a Dream, there was 5 of us, I think, in total. Khadija, her brother, myself, Tom, my brother, Naomi, and Mattia, 7 of us. And that was it. We didn't have any money to begin with, nothing. But as a collective, we came together and, you know, she more than anyone else made it happen. But we were a real team for that. And that, I think when I look back on my career, I think the thing I will forever be most proud of is that, having the idea and being involved in what was just the most incredible story with a wonderful person.
That's phenomenal. And I mean, what a legacy. Even if he didn't do anything else from here on in, that is just absolutely phenomenal.
Well, hopefully, yeah. I think it's important saying, because my brother actually, he said afterwards, he goes, look, we can either, like, we can sort of revel in the glory now of it and go to awards, and, you know, it did win a few awards, but it's a great story. But he goes, oh, we can actually make something important happen here. And so we set up the academy, and hopefully there will be children in 5-10 years time who we see riding in races properly, who go, the reason I'm here is because of Khadija Mellah. And if and when that happens, I'll be proud as punch, I think.
Absolutely. And you shouldn't, you shouldn't undervalue the awards, because that helps get the story out there even wider. And you might just be sat at another awards dinner where there's another person with a big pot of money that they can finance. And
yeah, the award being presented to me by Paul O'Neill, and I'll go, oh God.
Absolutely. Just, you touched on the Grand National at the weekend, first female jockey to win the Grand National. Is that going to be a watershed moment for gender equality in the sport, or for promoting it further, do you think?
Yeah, I actually think that probably on this, because I think in touring cars as well, it's mixed, isn't it? A mixed grid, isn't it? I mean, predominantly it's male, but there are female.
Yeah, Jade Edwards has got a full-time drive this season,
yeah,
which should be good.
I think, to answer your question, I think racing is probably the most gender equal sport there is, right? So, like, in terms of redressing the balance, like, other sports need to catch up. I guess it is harder in other sports, but for the last 30 years, probably 40 years, racing has led the way in many ways in terms of allowing women and men to compete on the same terms. What I think it will change is any questions now or any doubts from an owner's point of view about, oh, not as strong in the finish, or, you know, not this or that. The statistics, which I actually read today, show that women are outperforming men on the flat as jockeys. And there was talk recently about women getting an allowance, and they had an allowance in France. If anything, the men need an allowance because the women are outperforming the men. I think it will do so much, but it will do so much outside of racing, I think, hopefully. And within racing, it will just, like, there is no conversation now about male or female jockey. Like, they're jockeys, they're as good. Let's move on and park it. For racing needed a good news few weeks, because obviously prior to Cheltenham, we saw that awful incident of Gordon Elliott and things like that. And it's racing has a remarkable way of finding itself in a bit of a pickle, and then just having really uplifting moments that sort of remind you of, like, why racing is great. And I think the fact that women and men can compete equally, and then a woman can go and win what is undoubtedly, like, the toughest race in the world, having won and smashed it at Cheltenham, shows you that racing can provide year on year, time on time, just incredible stories. Yeah. I don't know what impact it will have outside of the sport, but it has to have a positive one. Like, it's just nonsense to think that a woman isn't as good as a man in everything, really. Like, it's ridiculous, right? So let's just never talk about it again, and just go, everyone's equal, right? It's so much easier.
Yeah, here. I've got one last question from me before I hand you back to Paul. I'm a lifelong QPR fan. Charlie Austin has saved our season, kept QPR in the Championship at least.
He ruined my
I
season. So.
really hope he's going to stay for next season as well. The Studs Up podcast, which
Yeah,
you
that's good fun. Yeah.
I have to ask you about it. What's it all
Yeah,
about?
I didn't know him before the podcast, and then Odds Checker and Sky Bet, excuse me, had this idea to merge the worlds of football and racing. And Charlie obviously loves his racing, and they very kindly asked me to host it. So he went into it, obviously, like most things were done on Zoom, and it's quite hard to sort of know whether you're going to have like a good working relationship with someone who's not an experienced broadcaster and has to sort of like navigate learning to present a show whilst doing it over Zoom and things. Like, it wasn't easy. But we did a pilot, and I knew straight away he's just a nice guy who loves racing, and we clicked straight away. So we've had this podcast. Series 1 has just finished and did really well, and hopefully there's plenty more lined up. I have asked him actually whether he's going to stay at QPR next year, and I think he would like to. So fingers crossed your wish can come true. See in the Daily Mail tomorrow, Bell says Austin is staying. But yeah, again, that's just a really fun thing to do. The next series will be in person, but it's kind of, again, goes back to what we were saying earlier, like you need people you click with when you work together, because that relationship comes across and things like that. And if it was stilted or jaded or whatever, then I think the listeners would know, but we get on great. And we have a right laugh, so I'm very lucky.
Cool. Talking about a right laugh, time for a bit of get to know Ollie, I think. Ollie?
Yeah, right. It sounded like a bit like Get to Know Owie, which is my nickname, but right. Okay, this is pretty dreadful, but we'll go with it anyway. Right then, Get to Know Ollie. Time for some quick fire questions. Me old fruit. Favorite food?
Sushi.
Oh. Favorite drink?
Cider.
Oh.
Boy.
Lovely. Favorite sports star?
Tiger Woods.
Oh, is he all right, by the way? I haven't seen any news on him.
I think he was. I don't know. I've not seen him recently. But, yeah,
you better not answer that, mate, because the Daily Mail still might be listening.
Yeah, I don't know. Hope he's all right.
Favorite ITV Motorsport presenter?
That is.
You say to him, I'll rugby tackle you.
Steve Ryder was my hero growing up, so I'm going to say Steve.
Me too. Favorite race meeting that's horses or cars?
I'll go for a horse racing one, and I would say Goodwood, which is where the Magnolia Cup was.
Yeah, we like Goodwood. Well, it's for cars and horses, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, it's both, isn't it? Yeah, cool.
Oh, so amazing. What's your current road car, Ollie?
I've got a Mercedes CLS.
A what? A Mercedes
CLS?
Oh, I thought you said SLS. Okay, that's
no,
right.
no. I'm not very good with cars, but I've
got a better car than me.
I've got 3 points left on my license, so you might be loaned the car for a while if I'm off the road.
No, dream road car.
My mates, one of my friends from work when I was a kid. When I was starting out, he was a professional puncher and he had an Aston Martin, and I've also always dreamed of having an Aston Martin. It's probably not a road car as such, but I'd like an Aston Martin one day.
Yeah, that's you be a beauty. Blur or Oasis?
Oasis. If they reunite, I am crying in the audience of that gig, I can assure you.
You sound like Martin Reardon.
Me and he'll be next to me, I can assure you of that.
Hey, I'll be there as well, mate.
Yeah.
I've been to some crazy house parties in like 95, 96, mate, when all that was going off.
I actually saw them in Main Road when in like the year 2001 or something. We went on a school trip there. It's unbelievable, yeah. I think I had my first snog in the bus on the way back. I remember it for lots of reasons.
Which we won't go into. Spice Girls or Little Mix?
Tough one. I actually like them both, but I'd say Spice Girls probably they were more nostalgic for me.
Good answer, my old friend. Right, Ollie. So you've probably been asked this loads of times, but the Queen said that you were a raving lunatic.
Yeah.
What's the story behind that, mate?
So my uncle, as you know, trains horses, and he had a horse running the Gold Cup at Ascot, and it wasn't really like that well fancied, and to the point where I kind of didn't even know it was running really. Sort of switched off. I backed the other horse in the race. And where I was working was I interview the winning jockey, so I'm down by the winning line. And anyway, I can hear the commentary, and I could hear Big Orange was the name of my uncle's horse. And he's in this like neck and neck finish with the favourite, Order of St. George. And it was like a really dramatic race. It was like probably one of the most dramatic races I've ever seen, really. And anyway, the commentator, I couldn't see the line. I could only hear the commentator, and I could hear Richard Hoyles, our commentator, say, Big Orange has stuck his big nose in front or something. And I genuinely don't know what came over me, but I dropped the microphone and then just started running after the horse. And I was like, got about, I don't know, it felt like about 150 meters, but in reality, it was probably only about 15 meters. And I turned around to look at the cameraman. I was like, why have I just done that? But like, every camera was on me doing it, running after the horse. So Martin and whoever's in the trucks that day, I'm sure we're having a field day going, oh, we've got some great shots of Ollie there. But the Queen watches from essentially above the winning line, so she could see running on the track. And anyway, the horse won. It was a great day for the family, blah, blah, blah. The next day, I got a tap on my shoulder just before I was going to interview a. Can you hear me all right, by the way?
Yeah.
Sorry, it just went black. Sorry. Anyway, I got a tap on my shoulder. I'm in the paddock going to interview the trainers before a race, and it's the Queen, and she goes, and John goes, someone would like to meet you. And I'm getting told by the director, Mako, I'm like, right, who have you got? I'm like, oh shit, I couldn't speak to him. I just walked over and met the Queen. And they're going to a break on ITV Racing, and they've got a shot of the Queen because she's got a runner in the next race. And I just walk into the shot, and I'm like, hello, Your Majesty. I don't know what you're meant to do. No one tells you. So I just sort of lob the hat off. Hello, Your Majesty, whatever, nice to meet you. And she goes, oh, you're the lunatic that ran on the course. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry about that. And then I go, I don't suppose you heard my dad's commentary of it on Talk Sport, did you? And obviously she's not going to listen to that. And she's like, no, I didn't. Anyway, Dad came over. We had a chat for about 3 or 4 minutes. Meanwhile, I can hear everything going on in the show in my ear, which is the shot of me meeting the Queen and everyone sort of talking about it. Anyway, off we scoot. We have a chat. It's like bananas. And then as I'm walking off, Ed calls me over to the podium, and then they're asking me to talk about it. And I've repeated word for word what she said, which apparently you're not meant to do. You're meant to, like, that's a very private conversation and whatnot. So I've gone, oh, she just called me a lunatic and everything like that. Anyway, the next day, obviously the papers picked up on it and whatnot, but it was bananas. It was bonkers, really. But then I've met her, I say a few times. Like, one of the first memories I have of seeing my uncle, I was about 16, and she, again, I'm probably not allowed to say this, but anyway, she sometimes pays a visit to the trainers yard, but like not on an official day. Do you know what I mean? So she just goes on, like home clothes, and off she scoots, And I was about 15 or 16. I'd been out the night before. I'd had a bit of a hangover, and I go down for breakfast, and I'm wearing, like, when you're a teenager and like your trousers around your, like, below your bum and things like that, and you're just like horrible, right? You're just festing. Anyway, I walk around the corner into the kitchen, and I'm like, oh, grunting away, what's for breakfast? And it's like, I grab the bowl of cornflakes and then go and sit down, and I look up and the Queen's at the other end of the table, and I'm like, oh, right. Good morning, Your Majesty. I'm going to go and get changed. So I run back round. Yeah, it's bonkers.
Oh, mate, that is amazing. Absolutely love that. Do you know, can I just quickly tell you, I met Prince Charles. I don't know if I might have told Martin this, but I met Prince Charles in 1997 with William and Harry. So they were dead young. So yeah. I was 16. I would have been 16, I think. It was 96. Met them at the Spice Girls, the movie premiere, because my mum, Armel come barging in and went, the royal family are here. We're allowed to take one person each in the green room. So like Mel B was picking a sister. My mum always went to everything. Armel's gone, oh, do you know what? Mum, you met Tina Turner the other week. So I'm going to take Paul, because my mum's a massive Tina Turner fan. So I'm like, oh, wicked. I'm nothing like I am now. I know I'm a bit awkward, but I was properly awkward, right? So we're all in a line, and I'm stood there, and no one has said anything to me. And to be fair, Prince Charles come along, and he's chatting to everyone like it's about 6 of us, and Mel's gone, this is my brother Paul. And oh God, he goes, oh, hi Paul, how are you? I was like, yeah, I'm really good, thank you. And he said, oh, where are you from? I went, oh, it's a little place, you won't have ever heard of it. It's a place called Widnes. And he went, oh yes, we've done a lot. We've tried to do a lot for Widnes. And I went, you need to come back, mate, and finish it off. And he I remember he kind of laughed, and Mel B was behind him, and she, in a big Leeds accent, was like, oh my God, look at Paul, he's got a beamer on. And my face was bright red. My sister was like I was getting dragged off the back of the stage in the green room. Oh mate, but we are like, we get on with the royal family then, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure they'll probably remember those stories.
Yeah, they probably sit around the dinner table and tell all the kids, don't they? These two idiots.
Yeah, that Paul O'Neill one.
Listen, the opening show is fantastic. You must have some highlights from it, or you've got a highlight for us. And also, who's the biggest arsehole that you've worked with on?
I can answer one of those questions easier than the other, actually. The highlights actually more recently, and this sounds really sort of boring and technical, but the viewing figures at the moment have been like unbelievable. So we've developed, I think now, having sort of worked on it for 2 or 3 years, obviously taken over from like the hugely popular morning line that was sort of like an institution for a lot of people. People are starting to find it now, and I think that the show that Tim Williams, the producer's putting together, and the team at ITV, who are really, as we know, very talented. I'm really proud of the show now. So I think that in general, where the show's at in 2021 is my highlight, because it's been quite a long road to get there in many ways. And like I was saying earlier, I think I probably put a lot of pressure on it and wanted it to be the best, and it takes time and things like that. And now I'm delighted. And the second question, I think actually it's probably important actually as like a life lesson, because I think when you work in the environment that we work in, or I work in, you work with a lot of different characters. You're just simply not going to be like best mates with everyone. I'd say that of the team, and we have probably a team of like say 10 to 15 on air, I'm probably like very good friends with like 3 or 4 of them, like okay friends with some of them, and actually just like wouldn't have much to do with like maybe 3 or 4 of them either. But that's not to say that like professionally we can't work. And I think it's important in professional environments to like have an understanding and respect for people professionally. I think what I struggle with is if people are like disingenuous, or like, you know, doing things to like undercut people, because I think fairness in life is really important. And, you know, there are, I'm sure, a few bumps in the road, or have been a few bumps in the road with people that I've worked with, but ultimately we're there to do a job, and do a job to the best of our ability. So provided you can have respect for people professionally, you don't need to be their best mates. And I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of people that I work with that I get on really well with. So I'm pretty lucky on that score, I'd say.
Top man.
Like the most
I like that.
Dramatic, but probably fairly obvious answer that I've given.
No, don't worry. This show is all about you, but I will say, for all the touring car guys and girls that are watching, the biggest arse that I work with is the knobber that is David Addison. He's an absolute div. I hate him. Anyway, it's recording. That's unfortunate. Ollie,
yeah,
mate, if you could pick your dream presenting job on a sport, what would it be and why? That's my last question to you tonight, mate.
That's a very, very good question. I think presenting wise, it would probably be, it's a very good question. Probably a Football World Cup. That's like high profile. It's obviously an incredible event watched by millions around the world, and football is a huge passion of mine. So rather than doing the Olympics, which is probably pretty stressful and would lead to moments of me not knowing what a cam belt was, I'm sure, when I'm covering a multitude of different sports, I think a Football World Cup. But I actually think, having made a documentary, I think going into different aspects of like the industry and stuff was something I found really interesting. And so I think if there was opportunities down the line to do more stuff in that space, then I'd definitely be interested and keen to do that. But from a presenting point of view, it will never happen. But a Football World Cup would be the dream. But again, it is really cheesy. But like, if I'm still presenting something in 10 years' time, I'll be pretty happy with my lot, basically. So I wouldn't say I'm like wildly ambitious. I just want to have fun doing what I do and like look after people along the way, basically.
It's so interesting talking to you, Ollie, because we've never really spoken that much.
Yeah.
It was Martin that said you need to give Ollie a shout, and I was like, oh, he ain't gonna want to come on here. But it is so interesting what you say, because people say to me, you need to aim at what you want to do, and I kind of have. But I'm like you. If I've got this job in 10 years' time, whether it's higher up or lower down, as long as it's on TV and covering something I love, I don't really care.
I think, and yeah, again, I probably could go on about this for a while, but I think quite a lot of people are motivated by money. And I think that's quite a dangerous thing to have, because that means that you've got to be more successful than someone. You've got to, kind of use your elbows to get up in life. And that leads to like people not being, like, it sounds boring, but it kind of leads to people not being nice.
Yeah. And
I would much rather, if I flatlined, right, and if I never did anything beyond, like, if I've peaked, right, at 35 or 34 or whatever I am, and never got like a bigger gig than this before in the future, but I was like happy and nice, I'd much rather have that than a big house and a fancy car. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think it sounds like really contrite, I suppose, but it's really important to me that. So am I ambitious? Yeah, I want to be the best I can be, because I like have standards for myself when I go on air or when I'm in a room. Like, I don't want to be a knob. I don't, like, I set my own standards. But am I like professionally ambitious? Only to the extent whereby I want to be like really nice to people. Do you know what I mean? And I want to be genuine. So I'll call a spade, but I'll be like nice doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that to me is much more important than a big house and a big car and things like that.
Totally with you, mate. And my dad summed it up to me years ago. He said, listen, whatever you do in whatever path you lead down, he said, always go to bed at night and know you can sleep and you don't have to look over your shoulder. And that's how I've lived my life. I don't owe anybody anything, and I've never, tried to do
the more like conventionally successful I become, the more I see people who don't have that attitude, and the more disappointing it is. And I think that's something that for youngsters who may be listening to this, like, you might get a bit disillusioned by how like other people operate, but like just try and stay in your lane and operate in the right way, because it's quite easy to sort of like get clouded, if you see what I mean. And I think the older I get, the more like I've learned that. I suppose not the older, it's probably just the more successful I get, because the more successful you get, the more competitive it is and the more egos there are and things like that. And I think it's just important to like not lose sight of the sort of youngster who just kind of didn't take life too seriously, basically.
Yeah, no, for sure, mate. And the one thing that we should do a documentary about, though, is you shopping for a Campbell in Dorothy Perkins. That would absolutely make my entire year. It's like that's the best story ever. And talking of young people and staying in your own lane and finding out what you want to do, I know Chris is going to help us out in the quiz. He's a big fan of yours because you're a presenter, and he's going to be doing, hopefully, he's going to be following us in what we do. So I'm going to hand over to Chris anyway, because you've got like the worst quiz in the world. This is not his fault, by the way. It's just known as the worst quiz in the world.
Right. Do I need a pen and a piece of paper?
Nah, don't worry about it, mate. It's like,
Oh, don't worry about that.
Yeah, Chris, listen.
It's one of those ones where you shout out the answer if you think you've got it.
Right. I love what you've done with your screen, Chris, by the way. That's topper.
Welcome. Anyway, right. So I think it's on to the as some probably would say, the second worst quiz in the world. It's the one with the themes, apparently. And this week's theme is the bells, apparently, which to me just sounds like a pub you might see down in Cheshire. It's questions for Ollie, yourself, and Mr. O'Neill.
It's Wednesday's podcast.
Oh, hang on a minute, Jazz. Can you stop talking? You've left your mic on mute.
Oh,
sorry, Chris. Go on, mate.
That's okay. It's a live broadcast. These things happen. It's quite amusing when that happened, actually. Right. So where was it? Oh yeah, questions both to yourself, Paul, and yourself, Ollie. Just shout out the answers if you know them, and there's only 5 questions, so you don't need to use Google or anything for too long. Although instead that, don't use Google, just shout them out. Question 1, which Bell patented the first telephone?
Can I shout that out? Am I allowed to answer them?
Yeah, shout it.
Yeah, just shout them out.
Is it Alexander Graham?
Yeah, you're correct. It's Alexander Graham Bell.
No relation, just to be very clear about that.
He's a much older person than
Yeah.
many people with that name these days. Second question, again, no relation to yourself, Ollie. Andy Bell was the lead singer of which English synth pop band? This was a trio with Vince Clarke.
Erasure.
You got it, Paul. It was Erasure.
Neck.
Question 3, Emma Bell, again, no relation to yourself, Ollie, appeared in films including Frozen and Final Destination 5, but was she born in the United States or Canada?
That's niche. I'm going to guess Canada.
I'm sorry, Ollie, you didn't quite get that one right.
50-50. Paul, do you want to have a go, mate?
No, mate. No. I honestly, these questions are the worst things ever.
It's a multiple choice, and I've gone for one and got it wrong. So,
did you say Canada or America?
No, Canada.
Canada.
I'll go for America then, Chris.
Yeah, you're right there, Paul. It was the United States.
You didn't answer.
To be more precise, she was born in New Jersey, which is interesting.
Oh, very nice, mate.
No, I don't think that's the same place where they have that fancy shoreline that they make reality programs for. Oh, my mum just said it is. Oh, never mind. Don't bother then. Anyway, question 4. Derek Bell won Le Mans, the 24-hour race, 5 times. But how many times did he win the American equivalent race, which is the Daytona 24 hours? Was that 2 times or 3 times did Derek Bell win at Daytona?
2.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. O'Neill. You're nearly there. You're nearly there.
I think it's 3, Chris. I remember.
You're right, Ollie. It is. He's a 3-time 24-hour Daytona champion.
Yeah, that third victory's lived long in my memory, Chris. Actually, so yeah.
And finally, and this is the last question. This is a real name on this, the person I'm about to talk about. What sport does O'Neill Bell compete in? Is it Paul's favourite sport, baseball, or is it boxing?
Baseball.
I'd go boxing, I think.
Oh.
You're right, Ollie. You're right. It is. It is boxing.
So,
Ollie.
So thank you, Chris. But listen to this, Ollie. So Chris's question about the baseball is because there's a very, very famous baseball player called Paul O'Neill in the New York Yankees.
I know that.
Get battered on Twitter by drunk Yanks, and I call it council rounders when I retweet them, and they proper go wild, don't they, Chris?
I have the same problem, Paul, because every time sometimes I do a Google search and it comes up with Paul O'Neill and it has the baseball player, and I think, no, that's not the one I'm looking for. I'm Boxall.
I had the same problem, Chris. I ended up joining a Zoom with an American baseball player an hour ago.
Nice,
man.
That's just the way we live in. Well done, Ollie. I believe you won that one. With
those questions were wicked. Well done, mate. They were class.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I believe, Tony, it's over to you now.
Nice one, Chris. I hope you'll come back and ask some more fantastic crap questions next week.
Yep, I certainly will. I'm up for that.
Awesome. Thank you. Conscious of time, Ollie, but at this point of the show, we open the mics up for anyone who wants to make a comment about the show tonight, or if they've got a question, or if they want to share anything from the week that they've had. And it's kind of tradition that we start off with Mr. Rob Marsh, who we will mute him after a while, but no pressure on you, Rob. Over to you, mate.
I don't feel pressure. Where's the pressure? I just had a couple of questions. One of them serious, one not so serious, but I'll start with the not so serious one. Ollie, you're a pretty good looking fella. You've got your best years ahead of you. You've done all right in the media so far. I've noticed that you've won a bit of money along the way. You've been with attractive females. So for someone who's not had as much success as you, what hints and tips could you give to Paul?
That is genuinely the best question I've ever been asked. And I was, for 99% of that, very panicked where you were going with it. I don't know. My advice to Paul would be to take up baseball. I think that.
Oh, O'Neill, yes. What a great answer. One more question. It's a bit more serious. I posted something about it last night, and it's something that you said earlier that made me think of it, about when you wanted to be a footballer. It was on Facebook that I posted it. So Tony would have seen it, but Paul won't have seen it because he won't be my friend on Facebook because he doesn't like me or something. I don't know. Yeah, you mentioned Yeovil. I don't know if you're familiar with what happened with them over the weekend or just before the weekend.
With Lee.
And I don't know the circumstances behind what happened with the captain. But as a Bolton fan, there was a fella that we had on loan from Charlton, Marcus Maddison.
Yeah.
Who was stepping away from the game for a while.
Yeah.
Mid-teen, and I think that some Bolton fans have been, maybe could be implicated in this because he looks a bit different.
Yeah.
And I thought to ask this question with you and Paul and even Martin on here, for people who work in the media and who are on social media, I know that it's easy for people to say horrible things without having any comeback. So you could just like create a fake account and then disappear and not be seen of again. Is there anything that you think could be done to stop that so it doesn't put as much pressure on people who might, if they depend on the media to be seen in a positive light, if people are just ripping into them all the time, do you think there's anything that can be done to stop that kind of attitude?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I know what happened to Lee. I read what happened to Marcus, or I've read that stuff, and I think his manager Ian should be applauded actually for for how he's handled that, because who knows where that would end up, but it very possibly could end up in a similar situation to Lee. Like I can give you a recent example actually, and not that I know that you're not saying about us in the media sort of getting abuse, because largely 99.9% of the time actually throughout my career I haven't really received any abuse, but recently there's this geezer on Instagram who just keeps setting up different accounts, but there's obviously no picture, strange names to them, and just every time I do anything, it's not always about me, but it's about people I work with, family members, and just like peppers abuse. And for me, the easiest solution to that is like, if you make everyone accountable with a picture of themselves and a name, then that would just instantly wipe out sort of 60, 70, probably even more, 70% of the abuse that's sent, because people hide behind these like anonymous profiles. And it's so easy to create one and then do it, that gets shut down, do it again and again and again. So I know a lot's been spoken about Thierry Henry's sort of left social media and saying that accountability is important. And I don't think it will ever go away until full accountability is required to set up a profile. And, mental health is so important. A couple of jockeys sadly took their own life last year. And in the world of racing, I think, when a punter backs a loser, a jockey gets so much abuse on social media. And it's brutal reading it. Like some of the stuff is, these guys are putting their lives on the line every day, jumping over a fence at 40 miles an hour. They don't need someone who's lost a fiver telling them to go and kill themselves, but you see that daily. And again, I've waffled, but I think accountability is important.
I'm pretty lucky actually, that the only abuse I get is off my own friends and followers who are, I have a giggle, but Ollie, I've actually had a troll that I picked up off my sister, and I won't say too much about it because there's a couple of legal implications on it, but also I am very wary that they could be not looking at me tonight, but they can come into this because of the swipe ups and the links that I put on my social media. But it doesn't concern me massively, and I'm not just putting a front on it, but I'm pretty lucky with what I do get. But I do know some people who get some absolute battering, and it just is, like you say, the accountability side of it. I mean, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram do not do enough. They're the most powerful platforms in the world, and they do not do enough. These people are, doesn't matter who you are, you know, you can be, I've heard some horror stories about kids at school. Like, I learned some stuff off my 12-year-old niece the other week. She was saying, oh, you know, this girl's going to cancel this person. And I'm like, what's that mean? And that means like completely shut them down, don't speak to them. And that is social media. I didn't even know that word existed. There's other words that she told me. And do you know what? I haven't got kids. And sometimes I think to myself, do I actually want kids to bring them into this world where there just seems to be an underground horrificness that's not controlled? And that could be not easily controlled, but could be controlled. It's not amazing. What do you reckon, Toe?
Well, Rob's asked two really good questions tonight, so I feel awful muting him. But if we had a mute button for everything, it'd be wonderful, wouldn't it? But on a serious point, now we've got Rob muted, which just, this platform's wonderful. Just going back to what you were saying, Ollie, particularly around mental health within the racing community. I've done bits of work with racing welfare, and I wasn't aware of just how huge the racing industry actually is, because the jockey club will look after all the jockeys, but people don't necessarily realise all the stable lads and lasses and the people who drive the horse boxes and everyone who's involved in such a massive industry. There does seem to still be an awful lot of people who do struggle with drug and alcohol issues. I know there's some work being done around concussion in the sport, because obviously when you're jumping over fences, you'll inevitably fall off a horse and often land on your head. I know there's some really good work being done around it, but do you think racing has got it right? Are they ahead of the curve when you look at, for instance, what football has been doing around dementia, which has been just trying to avoid the topic for so long? Is the racing industry good for mental health?
I think there's a lot of good people working on it, but I think racing is probably guilty as a sport of being consistently behind the curve and being reactive as opposed to proactive. I think football and rugby at the moment are sort of obviously doing a lot in the space of sort of head injuries and things like that. It's a very, very difficult one. To be honest with you, I'm probably not in a position to answer it correctly, because I don't see all the time the work that's going on in it. And I know that there is a lot of work now being done because of what happened to Liam and James and others in the sport who have had who have suffered. But I know that the PJA, the Professional Jockeys Association, offer therapy to everyone who has a riding license and things like that, paid for a certain amount of sessions. So that's really good and positive. And I doubt many sports actually have that level of care given to their participants. I think, to be honest, I just don't think you can ever do enough, really. I think that whatever you do, it won't ever be enough, because, you know, ultimately human beings are quite fragile. And I think we have to be so aware of everyone's different issues and stuff. So particularly this time, but I know that they're doing a lot. I just couldn't tell you comparatively whether that was enough or not enough, basically.
No, fair point. I can tell it's getting late. Have you not put the 50p in the meter, Ollie? Or are the lights just gradually dimming?
No, I haven't. Yeah, I just didn't want to leave. It is dark. Yeah, I was going to answer Bob's question. Once he talked about some of the women, I thought I'd get some mood lighting going if it went down that road.
That's been a fantastic session. I'll hand you back to Paul to wrap up, because I think we've we've just about exhausted every topic, and time is ticking by.
Yes, full show. Just a quick one. I did laugh because Shaz put a message in here saying, sorry guys, my mum's going to ring me tomorrow, because that's who we could hear when Chris was trying to do the quiz. So sorry to Shaz's mum. But yeah, great. It's been such a cool thing, not just to have you on, Ollie, but the questions that were asked, the stories you've got, mate. I thought it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and it showed me what I missed last week, actually. But yeah, it's been amazing, mate. So this is recorded. It's on Facebook, or you can find it on YouTube. The Positive Pit Stop. The Positive Pit Stop. We've got our Facebook page as well for the Positive Pit Stop. So please go on there and share some comments. And also, pretty soon we'll be saying who we're having on next. So, mate, I can't thank you enough, Ollie. We definitely need to meet up, go to Dorothy Perkins, get ourselves some cam belts, and have a grand time. But mate, it's been mega, and I'm sure I'm speaking for Chris personally. He will have loved having you on tonight. A proper presenter, handsome man. You're just everything that he wants to be.
Well, I think Chris is muted potentially, but his questions were brilliant. And if I know that you guys are going to show him around or whatever you said earlier, but if Chris, if you ever want to come racing and come and meet the team behind the scenes, then we'll sort it out afterwards. So when we're back racing and whatnot, come and see how we all do it live with me and Martin, mate.
Yeah, I'll take you up on that offer.
So
yeah,
please do. Yeah, that'll be magic. You can see how I bluff it for a living, how I wing it. But no, Paul and Tony and everyone, it's been an absolute pleasure being involved and meeting you all properly and chatting away. So thank you very much for having me on. But
perfect. Listen, want to thank everyone. Thanks, Tony, for helping us out with it, mate. As usual, you're the main man. This was your idea. I think it's great. I think I've seen some amazing stuff over the past 8 sessions that we've done. And I want to just say a personal thanks to Martin as well, who actually got me in touch with Ollie. It was a great shout. And I was too embarrassed to ask. So he asked for you, mate, he asked for me. But listen, guys, peace out. Big waves. Live your best life. Kisses for you lot. Bye.
see you guys.
See you guys.
Liverpool.